One of the more subtle things our parents teach us, whether they know it or not, is which feelings are actually okay to even feel. So if sadness, anger, any kind of neediness made your parents uncomfortable, you didn't just learn, okay, my parents have a problem with anger. You actually internalize, I'm bad for feeling this emotion. I shouldn't feel that. We now have to organize a whole way of being to kind of tap dance around these emotions. And unfortunately, that doesn't go away just because we grow up or move out of the house. For me, this would often show up as this sort of constant pressure to push myself harder and prove myself. And it took a while to really realize that that's not just how I'm made up. There's a lot of unfelt feelings generating that whole program. What makes this hard to spot is these things don't just show up as, hey, I'm your suppressed anger here. Right? It shows up as the patterns, as the behaviors, the procrastination, how you're acting in that relationship, any pattern that hasn't moved despite your efforts, or a thought like, I'm too sensitive, I need to get my act together. You believe those thoughts and you treat them like character traits rather than unfelt emotions. So we're going to look at what's actually going on underneath these patterns and what it takes to actually reverse them, because that's what we want in the end, right? So here's the mechanism. Your parents had feelings that they couldn't be with because they're human. They've got their own programmings and things going on. So when you expressed something they couldn't handle, even very subtly, right? Your whole body, nervous system registers, this emotion is dangerous. They don't like that. They reject me. Whether that's subtle or they literally say things, hurtful things to me. Call me too sensitive, right? So a protective pattern in us gets formed to not feel that emotion. And emotions need to be felt to complete. It's a very interesting thing. I talk a lot about this in my framework video. There's a playlist there about this. If an emotion doesn't get to complete, when it gets shut down or shamed before it can move through your body and be felt, it doesn't evaporate into nothing. It lives in you, gets fragmented, right? Still alive, but cut off from the rest of you. So it's not integrated. Fascinating, like fragmented emotion, like that anger you're not allowed to feel, is more reactive and more intense. It does show itself than an emotion that's been felt and integrated. So that's why the person, classic example, right, who never gets angry, when it happens, it's a volcano eruption, seemingly from nowhere. That's why a long stretch of managing yourself with discipline ends in that binge session, right? A really interesting thing about this, it's not that you have too much anger or too much hunger. It's actually quite the opposite. It's like you're not allowed to feel your anger or your hunger. You never were. And so it's there, fragmented. It's not integrated with the rest of you. It doesn't have context to your other emotions that can say, well, this is an unfair thing that's happening to me, but I can sort of see where the other person is coming from, right? The prefrontal cortex goes offline. That unfelt anger breaks through the doorway and you explode, right? That's the mechanism. So what do we actually do about this, though? Because as you know, just understanding your programming intellectually and being able to say, oh, my parents shut down my anger, that's why this happens, that doesn't give you the experience in your body of what is it feel like to actually be allowed to feel the emotion. There's good news about this. Okay, so when that pattern was created in you, the signal that the feeling is not allowed to be felt, there's a way to work with that. And it's simple in description. I'm not going to say that it's easy to do, but the frame is simple. Do the opposite of what your parents did. Right? So when you have a feeling, and remember, you often notice it as a reactive behavioral pattern. So when something comes up and you have the thought, oh, there's me being too sensitive again, or okay, I got to get my act together, got to grind and push through this day. Pause. Remember this video, there's an emotion behind this that's not super obvious. It's not saying, hey, I'm your anger here. There's something going on that was never given permission to actually be felt. And so instead of just doing the reactive behavior that you're used to, as an adult now, you can choose to say, I'm choosing to be curious and like move towards this emotion. Doesn't have to be dramatic, doesn't have to be a big process. You don't even have to like how it feels. Just give it permission to say, there's an emotion here, it exists. I give it permission to exist, even if it's uncomfortable. You know, I was never allowed to feel you. Kind of saying this in a way to the emotion, right? But in a way, it's not just words, right? You know, I was never allowed to feel you. I don't even know what you really feel like. My whole body wants to move away from you right now. But you know what? I'm not going to shut this down. I'm going to let you be here. That's the opposite of what your parents did, and that's enough to start. Remember, your body is going to push back. It was programmed intelligently at the time to not let you feel this dangerous emotion that's going to get you rejected or shamed. That was correct. So there's real visceral layers here that we actually consciously say, there's an uncomfortable feeling here. I choose to move towards it. Now remember, it's giving it permission to be felt. It's not a technique to get rid of it. That's what your parents did, right? Get rid of the sadness. So we don't want to use the tools like I have on this channel here, like tapping and other processes. They're not to say, okay, there's that emotion so I can get rid of it. We're doing the opposite of that. We're tapping, we're being present and saying, there's an uncomfortable feeling here that my body is trained not to feel. I'm choosing to be with that experience, to be with the feeling, to be much more generous and compassionate than my parents were and say, even if you're a little uncomfortable for me and you've been off limits for a long time, I give you permission to be here right now. And you can watch what unfolds as that does. And if you want to be guided through this experience, I have a free workshop that goes directly into this called Going Beyond Not Good Enough. Powerful feeling many of us have. Link to that is in the description. And please drop anything in the comments, your own experience with this, questions. I read all of them. Hope this helps. Talk to you soon.